6 young African-American girls were abducted and murdered in the Washington, D.C. area. Their bodies were dumped near major highways in and around D.C. They are known as the Freeway Phantom Murders. On April 25, 1971, 13-year-old Carole Spinks was home with her younger siblings while her mother was out. They were told not to leave the apartment. Her older sister Valerie lived across the hall and had given her $5 to pick up some soda, bread, and TV dinners. She walked the 4 blocks to the 7-Eleven. On the way, her mother had seen her. She told her to get straight home after leaving the store and that she would be punished, yet she never came home. Carole's mother filed a missing persons report that night. The 7-Eleven cashier said Carole did purchase food items and then left the store. Almost a week later, her body was found along Interstate 295 behind the St. Elizabeth's Hospital by children that were playing in a grassy section. She had been sodomized, strangled, had cuts on her face, chest, neck, and both hands, and her nose was also bloody. Her shoes were missing and green fibers were found in her clothes. The medical examiner discovered fruit in her stomach, suggesting that the killer had fed her and kept her alive for a few days. She had been dead for about 2 to 3 days when her body was found. Darley Nia Johnson was 16 years old. On July 8, 1971, she headed to work at the Oxon Run Recreational Center. She had plans to stay here overnight since the center was having a sleepover for kids, yet she never arrived. Her mother reported her missing the next day. 10 weeks later, a D.C. Department of Highways and Traffic employee found Darley Nia's body along Interstate 295. He called the police. Officers were sent out to the location by dispatchers, but the police radioed that they found nothing and left. It was the second call police received about the body. Reports said that the police never got out of their vehicle to look, that they just drove by. Another week passed, and one of the callers that reported the body went back to the area and saw it was still there. Now the body was rotting in the heat. This made the caller angry and told his boss to come meet him. His boss showed up and then called his friend, who was a D.C. police sergeant. Darley Nia's body was found 15 feet from where Carole was found. Her body and face were badly decomposed. The medical examiner had to cut off her fingers just to identify her, and yet the cause of death could never be determined. On July 27, 1971, 10-year-old Brenda Crockett left her house barefoot to go to the Safeway to buy pet food and bread. It was around 8 p.m. that night, and her mother thought she took a friend went to the store. After an hour had passed, Brenda's mother went to look for her. Brenda's sister was at home with her mom's boyfriend, and they got a phone call around 9:20 p.m. It was a call from Brenda, and she told her sister a white man snatched her up and took her somewhere in Virginia, but was going to send her home in a taxi, and she was crying. 25 minutes later, Brenda called again and talked to her mother's boyfriend. He asked her if she knew where in Virginia she was, and she told him no, and then she asked him, "Did my mother see me?" He asked Brenda, "How could your mother see you if you're in Virginia?" He told Brenda to put the man on the phone, but she didn't. She whispered into the phone, "Well, I'll see you." Brenda's body was found 8 hours later. A hitchhiker found Brenda on Route 50, just across the district line. She'd been raped and strangled. The bottom of her feet had no dirt or anything on them, as if someone washed them off. She also had the same green fibers on her clothes. 12-year-old Nina Mushiya Yates vanished on October 1st, 1971. Her parents were at the hospital with their newborn when she decided to go to Safeway only 1 block away to buy paper plates, flour, and sugar. Once she bought everything, she left the store and never made it home. A 16-year-old boy found her body about 2 hours later along Pennsylvania Avenue, east of the district. She had been raped and strangled. Her body was still warm. Once again, green fibers were found on the clothing. The media started to question the police if the murders were connected. The name the Freeway Phantom was soon given to the killer, and police said they might have a serial killer on the loose. On November 15, 1971, 18-year-old Brenda Woodard vanished after hanging out with a classmate at Ben's Chili Bowl. He usually gave Brenda a ride home, but on this night his car was in the shop, so they decided to take a bus. Brenda had to get off first and then get on another bus while he stayed on the same bus to his house. Her body was found on Hospital Drive south of Route 202 near Prince George's Hospital by a police officer that was on patrol. Her coat was draped over her body and her turtleneck was inside out. There were also buttons missing from her skirt and coat. She had been raped, stabbed 4 times, and strangled. She also had defensive wounds on her hands, suggesting she had tried to fight off the killer. A note was found in Brenda's pocket reading, "This is tantamount to my insensitivity to people, especially women. I will omit the others when you catch me if you can." It was signed the Freeway Phantom. The police said Brenda wrote the note for the killer because it had matched her handwriting. 10 months had passed and people were beginning to think the Freeway Phantom killer left the area or had possibly gotten arrested for other crimes. On September 6, 1972, 17-year-old Dianne Williams vanished. She was spending the evening with her boyfriend. Later that night, he walked her to the bus stop she could get home. Her body was found by a trucker who pulled off the road. She had been strangled and left along Interstate 95, 200 yards south of the D.C. line. In 1974, the FBI created a task force to investigate the murders. They questioned someone that owned a teen club where she had hung out and another man that was seen in a car with her. The FBI used sodium pentothal, known as the truth serum, on him, but he was cleared. Another suspect was Robert Adkins. He was a computer technician who served time for poisoning a prostitute in D.C. in 1938. March of 1977, a signed search warrant was granted, and the police searched his row house. They found the appellate court's opinion from when he was convicted, and it used the word tantamount, the same word used in the note found in Brenda's pocket. It was said that he used that word a lot when he was talking about important things at work. They found photos of girls, young women, an essay from a girl, a knife used in another crime, and women's scarves. A month later, the police got another warrant to search Robert's car. They found a gold earring and 2 buttons under his back seat. The green fibers didn't match any fibers in Robert's Hummer car. The hairs that were found all came back negative. The police didn't get any evidence to arrest him for the murder of the 6 girls, but in 2010 he was convicted of raping 2 women and kidnapping in a district a few years after the Freeway Phantom killings. He received a life sentence and died in prison on April 30th, 2010 at the age of 91. There were theories that the killer lived in the same neighborhood as Carole and Darley Nia since they were taken only blocks of each other. They claimed that the killer then moved to a different area because he might have felt someone suspected him. Even though the police weren't paying attention during the killings, the neighborhood was. Another theory was that the killer maybe had been a transient or served in the military, maybe someone coming back from Vietnam suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, or someone mad at the police. Some detectives believe this killer was in his 20s or 30s and was possibly African American. Robert Adkins was African American and 52-year-old at the time. In 1979, a detective found a thick folder about the Green Vega case. 2 men were convicted 5 years earlier raping and kidnapping young women in the D.C. area. They drove a Chevrolet Vega. A tipster said that the Freeway Phantom was a member of the gang. The police investigated the allegations. They were pretty sure the men were the killers because they took the police to the scene and described how they killed the girls. They even told them about the clothes they wore. Other detectives didn't believe them because the men only told them what could be found in the newspapers. They didn't match the note, and none of the hair matched the hair found on the victims. In 1987, the case was reopened. Darley Nia's mother said she would get strange calls while her daughter was missing, and one of the calls said, "I killed your daughter." Darley Nia's boyfriend at the time was asked to give an interview, but his mother wouldn't allow it. In 1990, DNA testing was available, and police wanted to test the hair, note, and fibers. Sadly, the items weren't preserved correctly, so nothing could be done. The evidence just all of a sudden gone. Tommy Musgrove, a former D.C. police officer and head of the homicide unit, said, "Those black girls didn't mean anything to anybody. I'm talking about on the police department. If those girls had been white, they would have put more manpower on it. There's no doubt about that." He compared it to the case of 2 white Montgomery County girls who went missing in 1975 from a mall. The bodies of Catherine and Sheila Lyon were never found, but the police kept on the case until 2015 when they charged Lloyd Welch, who was an imprisoned sex offender, with 2 counts of first-degree murder. He pled guilty in September 2010. Some say that the black girls weren't only enough priority, but it's not about race. It's also the fault of the police department for mishandling evidence and losing case files. Former Detective Romania Jenkins said, "What happens when people like me and their families are gone? This will be forgotten." The Freeway Phantom has never been caught, and the murders are still unsolved. Also, we'd like to say a special thank you to Vanessa for suggesting this case, and a special thank you to everybody who subscribed to the channel. Doris, Claire, I can keep mentioning you guys, everybody that comes and comments. Oh my god, the comments, you guys, are just as entertaining as the videos themselves, and they make this fun. As a special thank you from Creepy and myself, thank you.